So we're here to talk a little bit about the user journeys and specifically the SLI portion of this. As I was mentioning in the issue that I linked from the docs, the idea of a user journey is that it will span multiple services, most likely span multiple services because lots of the things do. Most things actually already span Workhorse and Rails, and generally we don't pay too much attention to Workhorse. So the idea is that we need to create a DSL that knows when a user journey starts, and then we register that or we do something with it. Need to be careful there with like we don't want to emit a log line for every started journey, for example. Every finished journey might be enough, or maybe we even include that in the end message. If the end is a sidekick job, then in that done message, if the end is a request, we use it there. And in the meantime, so we have the start of a user journey. For example, let's say in GitLab shell, in the example that I brought up in the issue, we're talking about a push, git SSH push. So that gets received by GitLab shell first. That's where the journey starts. And then the journey could end with the merge request being updated, for example. The push coming into GitLab shell, we need to register that somehow and be able to pass it on to the other services. So we can write like this journey was successful, this journey failed at the end. And we need to be able to emit metrics and logs on a failure of that user journey at any point in between. That's kind of the gist of what we will have to build for metrics, logs, and the SLIs that are going to tie to that. But user journeys themselves are going to be a bigger topic at GitLab because, like, for example, in relation to the summit, we're going to, well, I'm proposing to tie user journeys to our test runs, and we can test like using the reports that we would be able to generate from this SDK. We would be able to check in a test run like, yeah, this test run covered these user journeys, and these user journeys are this important, and like we could then focus on critical user journeys for smoke test, that kind of stuff. We can also use these to communicate back to product, like how well covered and how well the user journeys are performing. Like if they say like this user journey, like the time between a push and when the changes show up in a merge request, that should be maximum 15 seconds. Then we can tell them like we do for SLIs now, this is happening 99% of the time, so you're doing well, or this is only happening 70% of the time, that's not as great. But we can also tell them if we stick with this definition, like for this user journey, this is covered in the test suite this many times, so it's pretty well covered. Or you define this thing as a critical user journeys, but we don't have any tests covering it, no synthetic traffic. So that's why I think it's important that we start with the definition of a user journey that is done by product. Like they identify the things that are important for them, being logging in, pushing stuff, depending on the group. They define that in some structured way. Just Andrew, hi. I was just saying that.
Sorry, I'm late.
No problem.
Got distracted
So I was just
by
saying.
Something. Apologies, guys. Yeah.
Saying that, yeah, user journeys, we would like them to be like the journey itself would need to be defined by product managers, saying like this is the thing that a user will do, and then that gets implemented by engineers. And while the engineers are implementing, they are using our fancy SDK to say, here's where the journey starts, here's where it failed or succeeded or whatever. And we keep track of that. And at the end of a journey, we report that somehow. Reporting could be metrics, could be logs. In case of synthetic traffic, it could also be like emission of writing or of an artifact that can be used somewhere.
I think it should very much be both metrics and logs, because it's going to be really interesting and useful data at a later stage.
Yes, and that, as I mentioned earlier in the conversation, that would include like the success or failure, but also like the duration of the thing. yeah.
And in the logs, it would also be the metadata, right, of the request, so that we can chop it and hopefully
So
use it as the basis of next gen SLAs, because
yes,
we can divide it up and say, let's aggregate by namespace.
yeah. So metadata here is mostly the context, like everything that we need for that should be in the context. If it isn't, but that's a concept that we already have. One thing that I'm not yet sure of is, like, one thing that we have in the context is a correlation ID. Will a correlation ID map to user journeys one-to-one, like a single operate? I didn't think so neither. I think we probably need more. Like, we probably need a separate ID that is generated at the start of a journey that we pass on
That we
somehow.
actually log in I mean, you would hope that
yes, but it's going
correlation ID would travel through, but there's probably lots of places where, for instance, batching might happen, right? So like a bunch of requests do something and they batch up, and then
we do a cache population, for example.
There's no way to guarantee the flow of the correlation ID.
Yeah.
If you can't guarantee it, then it's pretty much useless. So
that's question answer.
I mean, that's just my like 2 cents on it, but like
no.
And then any part of the application which doesn't pass on the right correlation ID would kind of break everything, right? It'd be super fragile.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would it be possible in this case of batched things to send like all the correlation IDs, so one request?
I just have like I just have in my mind, I just think, firstly, arrays are horrible in Elasticsearch. When you've got an array field, they're just the worst thing in the world. And then secondly, I just have this kind of idea where there's like a log line that's got like 50,000 correlation IDs on it, and it's busy taking out our infrastructure.
I'm also worried. Like, I mentioned to Hercules that we probably want to log the beginning and, well, probably the end of a user journey. I'm on the fence if we want to include that information in the end log message. Like, if the end is a Sidekick job, it's logged in the done or fail message, or do we emit a separate log thing? The engineer in me wants to say, just do a separate log. So do we emit a single message if your user journey starts with a request and ends with a Sidekick job?
Yeah.
Do we log information of that user journey on the message of the completed request and of the completed Sidekick job, or do we log two messages in between?
Yeah. Again, I think there's like a many-to-many issue there, because like a Sidekick job could resolve multiple user journeys.
Yes. So the thing that the engineer, the backend engineer in me wants to say, no, we'll just write a separate file. This is going to be the log file for user journeys, and this is going to be
that's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah, and then the observability me is going to say, but that's so much data, and it's going to be duplicate. We're logging the context every time again, and then Stephanie is going to shoot me.
Yeah, but to me, that, like, analytics data is kind of always, by design, it's denormalized, right? Because that's how how analytical systems work is like by having like very denormalized data in that way, and that's kind of where you can get a lot of the value out of it. So to me, I appreciate that. I mean, just the value of having that that log file of all the user journeys, and then being able to run a query and say, what is this user's experience of the system like?
Yeah, well, and it's also
their
going to be
experience is really bad.
It's also going to be nice if we can use the correlation ID that would also be included there to like see which services were involved in between. Yeah. So let's do a separate log file, and then we'll deal with the volume once the volume gets big enough to notice. Because
not that we ever get proper tracing on GitLab, but it would be really good. I mean, you know how we've got the LabKit trace endpoint?
The Jaeger
It'd be
trace.
really good if they just emitted a span on each of those things, and then you could find that span in our imaginary trace system, which we don't have, you could find that span and you could just see,
But I
or
think
search
we should be
by,
prepared for that.
yeah,
Like when we are talking about our SDK, then
yeah,
in my mind that SDK lives in LabKit.
yeah,
So
yeah, absolutely,
tracing
yeah,
already lives there. So that means we
yeah,
can start and end spans
yeah.
for every message sent.
Yeah, and on that, you could potentially get an alert and then go to your tracing system and search by failures of this user journey and then kind of get all those spans back and like,
Yeah.
But again, it's complicated because there is like a many-to-one type relationship. So it's not guaranteed that that's going to work.
No, but I don't think we need to take it into account in this situation. I think so what else is in our document here? Different languages. So I think we should start with Python, Go, and Ruby. That's the languages we use the most. If there are other languages, we're going to have to build another lab kit, but we're also
So if we were to pick one, is there a single language that we can start with and get things right? Because obviously even 3 languages is like quite a tackle there, right? It's quite a big chunk. Can we make that smaller and say I mean, in my mind, Ruby is going to be the best one to start with, right?
I think so too. I think that we are going to have the most user journeys that start and end in Ruby. That means all the web services in Sidekick. I think we basically have to
stuff. That's all Ruby, right? Because that's the sort of
Hercules can explain this better, but it's all in Ruby until it's a until it's a CI job, and then it's in a container somewhere.
Oh
yeah.
So there's containers running on the.
It's a CI job.
Oh, it's a CI. Oh, okay. What is it?
It's
sort
a
of an
CI
invisible CI job, like that you don't see in your pipeline?
I think if we consider smaller pieces deployed in different spaces, like Go, I guess, would be the one with the most things, because I know that people from vulnerability management are writing the security analyzers in Go, and yeah, Go it's used for other smaller services.
But the requests are going to start. The user journeys are nearly all going to start in Ruby, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've got to have Ruby as well.
Yeah, I think we have to start with Ruby, and like for a lot of the journeys, we will like taking the SaaS example. Hercules has implemented this like a big part of this already, just using an application SLI, like the thing that wraps the job. Like the CI job is kind of like hidden, like it either succeeds or fails, but then we emit that signal from Sidekick.
Yeah.
And I think we can do the same thing. So we start with Ruby and then we add Go or Python. I would say probably Go, so we can include Gitly and Workhorse.
Yeah.
But then I would kind of like continue and do, because we've got Duo workflow.
How do you pass information into a CI job?
Right now, we don't have a solution for that yet. But between the other things, I would use headers and so on, no?
Or environment for like job environment variables?
Inside a job, that's a good question.
Could we have like almost reserved word environment variables like GitLab internal _ trace ID, or whatever, context ID or correlation
context, and then just a JSON blob, like we have one variable that we put some JSON in, and then. But I think that's
it's like a bit of a security risk there, but
yeah, but I think we can postpone that, because the team is also working on having like analysis as a service or something. I thought, where they would run a service on Runway that does
so
a bunch of
they're going to
things.
move away from CI pipelines.
I didn't say that. I think stuff is happening. So
how's that going to run on-prem?
I don't know, Andrew. They're
going to set up a Docker Compose setup for on-prem customers.
I think for this we can just start with
Yeah.
Ruby, and
I
then
just the only thing that I worry about is that, like, politically, if the big kind of push is this team and SAST and everything like that, we've got to like make provision, like, even though it's a bit of a odd duckling, like, because it's, you know, running CI jobs and everything like that, we can't politically, it wouldn't be good if we say, oh, we really struggle, because people aren't going to say, oh, it's because of
I think
it's because of
we
the CI job. They're going to say, like, maybe this idea is not so good, like, let's like start pivoting, you know, that
but we need to have user journeys go through runner anyway. So I think we will probably like,
are there other runner like based things that we will,
of course, like if a job gets I click the run pipeline button, that's a
yeah.
user journey, right? And then the job needs to be picked up,
there's a
and
slight difference between like something that is running inside a CI job that's able to kind of get that context and CI itself, right? Like, I think that there's, you know, getting information into CI versus on the, like, passing between the runner and GitLab itself. They're different, because the one is not
but
a public API, right? We can just change and do whatever. Between GitLab and the runner, we can just add, like you say, just headers.
yeah.
But then,
But I think we can also, because we do basically the same thing already for the security stuff. Like it's just for the runner, it's just a job, but we can inject information there, and then
okay,
when it comes back, a sidekick jobs get scheduled. So then it's not just a job anymore. So we add the
right,
information, we include the runner, and okay, the
yeah,
container remains a black box.
right,
But then that's the next stuff. Like I think we're already pretty close now to have the checkpoints. Yeah, and I think when I was talking to Theoretic,
yeah, Lucas.
Lucas, yes, they are working on having better signals coming out of the container.
Okay,
Like, because right now it's like the job should always succeed, and then analysis happens later. Hercules, please correct me if I'm wrong here. Uh, so yeah, that from that perspective, we could use the failure, but I'd rather not.
okay.
Like the job failure,
So,
maybe
okay.
we could even.
So can I kind of jump onto a different tack?
Yeah.
What's going to be the story around like state? Because there's obviously going to be state that needs to be held for these user journeys.
My idea is to pass it around in memory. So I was hoping that we didn't have to write it anywhere.
But what happens? I don't know, because what happened? There's got to be some reconciliation. If something's leaking out and it's just dropping the ball,
yeah,
and it's just not getting through, you've got to be able to reconcile that, and that requires
that's
state.
true. That's true.
There's got to be something that's looking and saying, this thing was supposed to report back by this time and it hasn't. We've got to like mark it as being out of action. So there's got to be some, at least in my mind, there's got to be some state.
Yeah,
Can't do it without state, I think.
No, in my discussions on this, like 6 months ago with Andreas, I was thinking like maybe we can store it in Redis somewhere, or have a separate service, because
Redis
like
is probably the easiest place. It's kind of,
but we need to expose this
designed.
Redis to different services.
Yeah, Redis behind a service, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially like if something like a runner with the runner, I don't know. Yeah, I suppose you could have it coming through like a public API.
Well, then LabKit is the thing. Like this needs to be hidden from developers, right? So LabKit is the thing that needs to talk to our separate service.
And also, like, if you've got a runner, right, that's running out on the internet, it's obviously got to know how to kind of talk back to the GitLab. I suppose it would always have to be the same as like the endpoint that it's fetching the requests from. So obviously it's getting API v4 jobs runner, but there maybe be like something else on the same endpoint, which is like, user journey, internal user journey, like complete or something like that.
I think like for the runner example, how I would fix that is just every check-in that runner does, it includes information if it can.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
then
Back to the
Rails.
GitLab. So you always piggyback. Yeah, because I mean the other problem is that you almost don't want to DDoS the GitLab instance with your
No.
own user journey information
No,
from your clients, from runners,
if
right?
from clients, like the same thing happens for like I don't recommend that we do this from the get-go, but we could start considering gathering information from the web browser, like the client that's a web browser,
Yeah.
and see like round trip kind of things. But like
What's that got to do? How would that be a user journey?
I'm thinking about the thing where like the AI stuff where we have the browser, the client is VS Code, and it
Yeah.
talks directly to AI gateway, where like the
Yeah.
only thing.
Yeah. But that's obviously that's a program. That's like
Yeah, but we could still do it in an AI gateway, in an AI gateway instead, so we have a reliable clock.
yeah. Because I think the only thing with like browsers is that they're not 100% reliable, right? Like if somebody navigates away or
No, so we keep all the checkpoints inside our infrastructure.
yeah, at least initially.
Yeah. But do we need this separate service from the get-go? Do you think?
No, well, so where are the reports going to be coming from? They're going to happen in Ruby, Workhorse. They're going to happen in Sidekick. And then I guess the question is, are they going to happen in the AI gateway, which is probably a yes. Because that's the hard one, right?
And Gitly.
And yeah, Gitly, we can probably, I mean, probably
We
most
can probably
of the time
get
Gitly can get to a, see, I think, yeah, then, oh man.
I think we need Gitly for the stuff where there's like direct interaction between Workhorse and Gitly and direct interaction between Shell and Gitly. Because otherwise we need to, yeah.
I mean, one option is that it's one option which will not work very well in some circumstances is to just put it as a runway service.
Well, no. Well, the thing that the extra service would be a runway service, no matter what.
Well, it depends on whether we back to the on-prem story, right? And the dedicated story, because this is going to be really important for dedicated. So are we going to front run runway on dedicated in order to get this?
Can this information leave dedicated?
No, not really.
Then I think like
because we've got all that we've got all that context, right? We've got like the namespace and we've got like project names, like.
So I think we will have to run the service inside of dedicated and then get that into our into the metrics that are dedicated.
This is the worry that I have with like, the whole runway. It's not supporting self-managed because there's like several services.
But they are working on it, right?
I know, but it's the Siphon as well is another one where it's probably going to start off as a Helm deployment and then maybe move to runway later when runway is available in other locations. But it's a separate discussion.
But as we speak, last time I talked to Florian, he's working on regular Kubernetes.
Good. Yeah, that's exactly. So if I don't know what the timeframes on that are, but yeah, it's really important.
The timeframes on this are also not 2 weeks. So I think I think we should start with a blueprint with what we just discussed, and then we can drag in the people from because they support a lot of the things that we need now for the state.
Yeah,
we can have our runway service. We can write it in whatever we want,
Yeah.
We have memory store. They already support that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we've got
No,
our state.
it would be really so. And the other thing that I'd say is we've just got to make sure that we are very good with in the SDK. We do like batching and retry. So we basically we'll do exponential retry and back off and retry on delivering the information through to the service, so that
Yeah.
if the user journey service falls over, we don't have like a massive system-wide outage. In the same way, we don't carry on batching them up forever and like consume all the memory and
Do all
all
of
of
the
that stuff.
SLIs, that's a good question. Do all of the SLIs come from this separate service? Like
Well,
the thing,
we've still got the like classic SLIs, right?
that's what I'm like. We've got classic SLIs, but do the user journey SLIs all get emitted by our service? I'm not opposed to that. The reason I'm not opposed to that is because it frees us up to use OpenTelemetry and we're not tied to the Prometheus client thing inside Rails.
With exemplars and everything.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
can
yeah.
actually you can
It's
actually get
OpenTelemetry.
exemplars finally after 5 years. Yeah. I mean,
But then we're tying all of the user journeys SLIs to this single service. That is
could you
spent.
run yeah. I mean, could you run it in tandem?
Yes. Well, yes, you can emit metrics from everywhere you want. No, like
Yeah, but like, can you run two copies or like multiple copies of the service? So if one goes down, or like during failover, and yeah, I mean, I suppose, yeah,
but that's what the retries are for, and we deploy it
yeah,
multi-region and all of that stuff.
yeah. I think that's probably fine. I mean, yeah, runway is definitely if we can just work out the timing, then runway would definitely be a good option.
If we don't do runway,
yeah,
then there's not really a different, like there's not another story we have. No, like we could deploy our own service, but then it's also only for us, only for GitLab.com.
So there is kind of like one option, which is that we just wherever the user journey ends, right?
That's the thing that I was going for first.
Yeah, we just expose, but you still need the Redis, right? You still need to do the
yes, but then where the user journey ends, the thing goes to ask. So give me all the information to the service.
Yeah, but all of those places where it ends have to be able to access the Redis that's keeping the
the service. No, because the service. No. I was wrong. You're right. It needs to be accessed to Redis. So then it needs to be our shared state Redis.
Yeah. So they need to, because they need to be able to tick it off in there and say, yeah, it's done.
Yeah. Drop it.
One of the things that'll be very good to have in the blueprint is a whole lot of different examples of the user journeys. So from the most boring one, start and end in the monolith, to something more esoteric, like start in the monolith, end in Sidekick, start in the monolith, batched up into what about things like Sidekick jobs which are deduplicated? Like, do we need to think about that up front?
Well, there needs to be an end somewhere, right?
Yeah, like so if a user journey kicks off, yeah, no, I mean we've just got to, that's the sort of thing we've got to be a little bit careful of.
Yeah, no, this is it's a good point, but it needs to be included. Like that's
and
batching and so on.
And then like once we have all of those different scenarios, we can kind of evaluate, okay, so if we're going to use a Redis instance, like do all of these things have access to Redis? Like I mean, I'm actually amazed, like, are we still in the world where GitLab does not talk to Redis at all?
We are. There's no.
It's quite incredible, actually, that we still, like, after all these years, that no one ever said, "Oh, let's just do this." And
like somebody was, yeah, somebody wanted to add a database to Gitly, but then they didn't.
Well, Gitly is a database now.
Well, yeah, it is, but to add a relational database to Gitly.
Yeah.
Isn't that the thing? No, it is. There is a database there. It's Prefect
Yeah,
as
but
a
yeah, that's
yeah.
sort of leaving us.
Yeah, okay. We're leaving the
Yeah.
topic that we were meant to talk about.
But just having like spend a lot of time at the front of the blueprint talking about like all the different scenarios of like the different potential routes that we would see, the reconciliation process for basically cleaning up, how often that runs. Does it run like, I guess actually Redis is pretty good for,
Yeah, we
yeah.
can set TTLs, but we also
Yeah.
need the service to check like, okay, this
Yeah.
thing we haven't heard for 5 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, you can use events, and I mean, yeah, you can. I mean that stuff. Redis is like very good for that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean that'll be. There's a lot of things that seem to be getting built, a lot of proposals that seem to be getting built on top of this. So it's quite an important thing, and
I think that we should start with the definition side of things, where we get product to define user journeys in a way.
But are you going to do that for this SAST one, this SAST, the scanning one?
I think we will have to. Well, we kind of hacked it in without any separate services and so on, but we can improve it, and then we can use that as an example on how we could improve the current SLI to include these different places it can fail.
Yeah. Cool.
So, Hercules, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to mention that you started the call mentioning about product defining the user journeys, and just mention it again. I started using user stories on the Docs Hub documentation because it's a kind of vocabulary that product managers and engineers are kind of use it to, and they kind of easy to describe. So maybe we can continue trying to use that for
it's got to be a little
manager.
Like that's a very good approach. We've just got to make sure it's got like some rigor around like timeouts and like what's considered a success and what's considered a failure. Because in your classic user journey, it's like it only really considers the happy path. We've just got to be quite strict about saying, well, what is the happy path? And how long
can it take
that happy path?
Yeah, and that'll influence a lot of things. Like we also need to, like, if the user journey is something that can take I don't know, 10 minutes, then we need to know how often we need to check in. Yeah, with sensible default. So go ahead.
I mean, from the point of view of the thing that is reconciling and looking for things that haven't called back, I don't think, like in any of those cases, I don't, whether it takes a second or an hour, presumably you can just push a job onto, like, you can have some sort of ordered queue in Redis, and you can just kind of pop it on there, and then pop things off as the time comes up. And it doesn't matter whether it's, you don't have to check in on, you don't have to have a thing that's kind of checking in. You just look at what's at the front of the queue.
If we want to keep our separate thing of errors and attacks, then I think we need to check longer than a thing can live.
So is this a good time to challenge whether we should keep that as a, I mean, yeah, I like it because
Me too.
Because there's a different reason for the two.
There's often a different reason, and also one weighs more than the other in my mind. Like the thing being a bit slow, but I can still work, is less than the thing is throwing 500 all the time. That's a different discussion.
So, but maybe then we issue like two sub-user journeys, and the one is a time-based one, and one is a no.
No,
Yeah,
I think we have a single user journey, and
Yeah.
it sets a maximum time
Yeah.
because we need to have that anyway. And then what
Yeah.
we do with it internally can still change. Like if we
Yeah.
keep apex and errors separate or not, we can still change that. Like,
Yeah. So something might take like 1 second in a satisfactory mode and like 2 seconds in a tolerable mode. But if it hasn't checked in for like a minute, you've got to ultimately
like
kind
that.
of say it's failed, right? We're not going
Yes.
to, we're going to just write this off at this point.
Yes, and then if it still succeeds, that's, well, maybe a user that is slightly less unhappy, but still not good.
Yeah, but we can't keep holding on to that. We can't say like, oh, maybe it's a week later.
No, but if your target is 1 minute, we don't need to hold on
for longer than
to it.
We fail the whole thing at that. Like there'll almost be like a third threshold. So there's kind of
there's a lifetime.
The thing that we might want to challenge is the satisfactory untolerated, and just say we just have one threshold. But
I would say
that's
we have
a
one
separate
threshold.
discussion.
That's what we do for application SLIs already, like one threshold.
Oh, there's not two. Yeah,
so one threshold, but we can have based on that threshold, we can have our own lifetime. Like if your threshold
so
is
you
1
times
minute,
it by 10 or something like that.
Yeah, then we do like, okay, we will wait for 10 minutes. Like your target was 1 minute, we will wait for 10 minutes. If we haven't heard from it by then, it's failed.
It's a write-off. Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
So where I think we should start from here is writing up a blueprint with rough things that we've discussed and what we want to cover. Like as Andrew mentioned, examples of user journeys that span multiple services, how we are going to keep track of these journeys and how we want them to check in, call successes, where the metrics are going to come from, where the logs are going to come from, that kind of thing. Hercules, do you feel comfortable taking that?
Yeah, maybe I can give it a try.
I'm available, and Andrew is as well, and yeah. But otherwise, I'm very happy to help get you started if you want.
Yeah.
Try. Yeah, definitely. Like start off with all of those cases, because I think that'll almost be like it'll really get everyone's thinking about like all the different. If you can put some drawings in of those, because I think they're the kind of thing that can be quite helpful if they're just visual.
And don't go too much into implementation details. Like we don't need to go into what the SDK will look like. Just mention that there's an SDK that's easy to use for developers, and that's it. And then we'll figure the details out once we start implementing things. Similar to the service, we don't need to mention yet what the service is going to like. Just mention a service on Runway, and then with Redis or with state. Even Redis is not important.
I have a question on the service. This is either going to be a really stupid question or it's going to drop a grenade on the whole thing. When we're talking about creating a service, how would that be different to a typical tracing service? Like, why are we talking about building something and not using something that perhaps already exists?
So tracing service doesn't it doesn't have conditionals around like the trace has got to be finished by this time, or like the trace has got to finish without this type of error. So traces do have the concept of an error, like this is an error trace or error span, and then you can say, give me the traces that have got errors. But you can still have errors on successful traces, right? Where what we're looking for is like a very specific business condition rather than just
for
there was
users.
an error of some sort. So I mean it's definitely worth asking that question, I think. And I would even put that into the blueprint, Hercules, like and just say why not use just a distributed tracing, and I'd say that the reason is because we have to be able to craft like very specific conditionals.
That makes sense.
I mean you could do something where you put a certain attribute on a span. And then, but actually, no, it's difficult because spans would, what we said is the user journeys merge as well.
Yeah,
so
because
it's not one.
If we do tracing
trace per user journey,
If we talk about distributed tracing, we could also record. Like, could we record separate from from like service, like the traces of services that you're thinking about, but just record the journey and have separate check-ins and separate spans?
But they would, you would have, like, there might be cases where there are, firstly, yeah, I think there's cases where there will be like multiple user journeys. You know, they'll
Yeah.
merge and they will diverge. You know, they might start on the same request and end on two different
Yeah.
sidekick jobs, or
And
vice
then we
versa.
also have
Start on-
things, we also
and-
have things that never end,
yeah,
and then we fail them.
and there's another point here, which is that our journey, like, of tracing is not something we want to build on top of at this point, 5 or 6 years into waiting for a distributed tracing system in GitLab. So
Liam,
so
this
like,
is not an excuse for not building tracing. Like we will build
Yeah,
this
yeah,
thing
yeah,
because
yeah.
the business
But
needs
I don't
it,
want
but we
to.
still
I don't
do
want to.
tracing.
I don't want to hitch any critical systems to the to said tracing after 6 years of broken promises.
I think you're right though to call it out in the blueprint, because it is a question that always comes up,
absolutely.
right?
No, 100%. But yeah, I think the main thing is there's different cardinality to the user journeys compared to a trace, I think.
And we're also doing more things with it. Like we're doing the logs, we're doing the other reporting that we talked about for testing and so on. We're doing metrics that we use for SLIs. We also want something, probably logs, that we're going to use for SLAs, like customer scope SLAs. So yeah, I think doing our own thing that uses what we've already built with context and so on is the right goal here. But we can write that in the blueprint and somebody can challenge it.
Yeah.
Also, people would expect way more context information in a tracing tool than what we are actually trying to do here.
Yeah.
So we need to be careful with the expectation of people using that tool.
There'll be links, right? So we'll emit traces from this, and report to a tracing system. And when that comes,
when we have a tracing system, it'll fit right in.
Yeah. I mean, imagine how fantastic it would be to, like, in an alert message, just say, like, find the spans or find the traces, and it's like, brings them up.
Hercules, is there anything more you wanted to know? Like this got sparked from the first iteration of this application SLIs that you used to implement this, but this is a lot more color. Does it kind of fit with what you want to do, or?
Yeah, well, I can sketch the design document. Of course, I'll have a lot more questions, and I'll ask many more questions as I write it. I probably need to have another call, maybe.
No, if you want
Andrew.
to pair on writing it and so on, that's totally fine. You can drop something in my calendar and we'll work it out.
Cool. I'll have a document with the structure. I'll write some things there that we discuss.
Do you want to review my proposal for the tech summit as well? Because it also touches on user journeys and how we can use it for end-to-end test for test reporting and so on. Like, it might be good to have your take on that.
I have a question about that. And I think it's very important that Hercules reads that and reviews it. But I have a question about that. Do we want to build, or do we want to discuss that in the initial blueprint? So what we might want is we might want a way from our spec to evaluate, which tests have or which user journey types have been completed in a particular test run. And do we want to consider that as part of the initial thing, or do we want to just kick that can down the road?
I would kick that can down the road, but we should keep it in mind. That's my opinion.
Maybe just put a link to the discussion or some,
everything's private.